It's hard to hear people well when they say things like, you can't do that, when you're already doing it. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's episode, we are going to be discussing the levels of understanding the infinite banking concept. Let me go all the way back to where I was in 2015 when I first had a friend call me up and say, hey Jesse, I just heard about this idea about becoming your own banker. And then there followed, I can't remember. I really can't remember anything from that conversation other than my friend sounded excited about this financial plan, this idea, this concept, this book. You know, there was mention of becoming your own banker. And I knew that there was a book associated with it. And I had an opportunity to see a live presentation that introduced me to the infinite banking concept. And then that led to the book, and that led to a question and answer back and forth between a professional who could talk about what was relevant for me and where I was coming from financially speaking. So what I'm saying is prior to being exposed to the infinite banking concept, I was at level 0. So I'm going to lay out these levels of understanding the infinite banking concept. And again, this is just my perspective. This is just my takeaway in having going on 9 years now of reflecting on our exposure to the infinite banking concept, our implementing the infinite banking concept, and then of course all the way now to professionally coaching and mentoring and teaching other people about how you can become your own banker. So I was at level 0 back in 2015, meaning I'd never even been exposed to the idea of banking, let alone becoming your own banker. So level 0 represents where the average All-American is at. And the average All-American is going through life not even thinking about financing, not even thinking about the banking function. It's something that we've completely abdicated. And we're either financing one of two ways. Either we're conventionally financing things at the commercial banks, our cars, our homes, our educations, everything. It's all going through the conventional banking system, the commercial banking system. Or we've had somebody in our lives that encourages us along the way of paying cash for everything. So either we're conventionally financing or we are saving up and setting aside cash to be able to pay cash for things. And that is indicative of level 0. You're doing one of those two things, only one of those two things, maybe a combination, but you understand what I'm saying. That's what banking looks like for you. That's what it looked like for me. We had paid cash for some things in life. We had conventionally financed some things in life. The educations, cars, conventionally financed. Cash, we actually bought property and a vehicle. Cash money, vacations were probably a mixed bag. Some vacationing we had done with cash for sure. Some vacationing we had probably used credit cards or whatever, like many have. So that's where we were. Level 1, the first level of understanding, and let me interject here. I guess I meant to say a moment ago that normally I would like to go ahead and tell you what I'm going to tell you. I would like to go ahead and tell you about these levels. But in thinking about saying those up front, I decided against it, and you can let me know in the comments. You can let me know if you're a client in our next conversation, you know, how this struck you. If you're vetting this idea of becoming your own banker, make sure to bring this up in our conversation. I'd love to be able to hear your feedback of how these levels line up with your own experience, whether you are vetting this concept, whether you're already a client or whether you're a prospective client and you're in our process right now. I'd love to be able to hear your feedback, but these are mine. So I'm going to tell you all these levels. I'm not going to list them out up front. So level 1 is being exposed to the infinite banking concept. You become aware of the idea, the concept, the possibility that you could become your own banker. So whether it was like me and a friend talks to you, or somebody shares a podcast with you, or somebody gifts you with a book, Becoming Your Own Banker, however it is that you become exposed to this idea that you can become your own banker, that looks like what it looks like. And then from there, I think the quote that I've used in business for several years now before I'd ever heard about the infinite banking concept, probably right about the same time I started in on business right at the same time that I became exposed to the idea of becoming your own banker, which is going to come into my conversation here soon. But I heard a quote several years ago now, of course, that you don't know what you don't know. Now, maybe you've known that longer than I had, but I'd not grown up hearing that concept. So you don't know what you don't know. See, that awareness of level 1, becoming aware of an opportunity to become our own banker, we realized that we just didn't know what we didn't know. Okay, so we become exposed to this concept. That was me in 2015. And then you go through this vetting process. Like I said, when I saw a presentation, when I got to read Nash's book for myself, when I got to ask my questions, my wife got to ask her questions. We were talking about this between ourselves, and then we got to talk with a professional, and we even talked with others about their experience. So we went through this vetting process, and then we got to this next level of understanding. So once you become aware of an opportunity to become your own banker, one of two things happens, right? And I've thought about this. I don't know what makes some people get it and others don't. I can realize and recognize that in 2015, because I had left just the conventional trajectory of going to school, getting good grades, going and getting a good job, being in a career for 30 years, investing into qualified programs for 30, 40 years, all those conventional things. When I began to work for myself back in 2015 in a separate industry, I became more open-minded. So when I was exposed to the idea of becoming your own banker, I was very open to the idea of personal growth and development, of nonfiction reading. And I emphasize that because I've always loved to read, but I'd read a lot more fiction probably than I had nonfiction. And even the types of nonfiction changed. I began reading biographies. I began reading finance books. I began reading personal growth and development books of all different categories, of emotional intelligence, of financial intelligence, parenting, marriage. I mean, lots of areas. So I don't know what makes, there's a parable about this, that the seed is the seed, the ground is the ground, and sometimes the seed falls on rocky ground. Sometimes the seed falls on ground and it's picked up by the birds. Sometimes seed falls on the ground and it starts off really good, and then it withers in the sun. And then sometimes seed hits good soil and it yields 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. So I don't know what makes some people do and some people don't. That just seems to be the way of things, okay? But I was exposed at the right time. Right place, right time. I had the right mindset. I'm not saying that I've arrived, right? But I became open-minded around 2015 in a way that I had not before, professionally and personally. And once I went through that vetting process, my wife and I, in discovering that, okay, we know enough to get started. See, I feel like that was another level of understanding the infinite banking concept. Having read the book, had our private discussions, had professional discussions, have questions answered. Of course, I think there are more materials now. Now there are things like the Nelson documentary. I really encourage folks, either while they're in the vetting process or even if it's after they know enough and they're getting started and they're beginning an application and they're signing up and scheduling for a medical exam for the underwriting purposes of getting a policy, and we're having ongoing conversations. Nowadays, of course, I encourage folks to watch the Nelson documentary. It's great. It's about an hour long. You can read about Nelson's experience in conceiving this infinite banking concept and launching it off the ground and spreading the good word, the good news about it. That wasn't available when I got started, but it is now. So it's one more of those things where you have access to a lot of, we've got years worth of material now on our YouTube, on our podcast, of my best practices, the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty, the how-tos. And then, of course, deeper conversations on implementing this concept. But there's lots of material there. But regardless, you get to a point where, yes, you've been made aware. That's level 1. And then level 2 is knowing enough to like I said, fill out an application to share your personal identification numbers and information, and to have a medical screening exam lined up in your schedule, and do the things to get the ball rolling, to give your banking information, what accounts you want to pay from. Are you going to be paying monthly or yearly or semi-annual or quarterly or whatever that's going to look like? But you know enough to get started. And I remember my mindset, and I remember the time frame of we'd done our vetting and we just knew enough. We didn't know it all, but we knew enough, and we knew that we wanted to become our own bankers. And that actually makes me think of a quote from James Nethery that I like to repeat often because it's so good. He says that it's all conversation until someone writes a check. So again, it's one thing to become aware about infinite banking. It's another thing to realize, okay, you know enough to get started, and then the medical exam and the application, and you've had consultations. We've had consultations together multiple times. We've been on the phone together, and we've been talking about your particular situation, and this policy is being structured for you. And then it comes time to write the check, to give the banking information, to sign the policy and own this private asset. And then I think there is an absolute, so I would say there's a quantum leap between being exposed to the infinite banking concept and then knowing enough to know that you want to become your own banker and beginning that process. I would also say there's another quantum leap between signing the policy, owning the policy, paying that premium, and capitalizing for whatever time frame that you've chosen. You know, of course, on the interwebs, we're told that, whole life is a terrible place to put money. You can't have any kind of cash value that you could use practically for 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever. Okay. My wife and I, we access capital by being policy owners within our first year and within 30 days of owning that policy. We had a lot of debts that we wanted to jump immediately on into recapturing those debts into our privatized banking system. That was number one. That was our priority when we got started. But that's what's said and purported on the interwebs. It's not so. And what I'm saying here is that this third level of understanding, I titled it Belief. And I titled it Belief because, sure, you've heard that this is a great thing. You've heard about compounding. You've heard about your contractual right to access capital. You've heard about all these benefits and these wonderful characteristics of a properly structured whole life policy with a mutual company that pays dividends, and what kind of control you can have as the owner of such a policy for your privatized banking purposes. But it's a very different, it converts into belief when you call the company up and you say, hey, this is me. And they ask you two questions. Ask you, how much of what is available do you want us to send to you? And where do you want us to send it to? And then they actually do it. And you actually get that money from owning this self-collateralizing, appreciating asset. And then, of course, you're recapturing debt, or you're financing something in your life, whatever it is that you're doing. Okay, you're becoming your own banker. It's a different level of understanding because, see, now there's belief with it. See, I was on the phone this week. I was on the phone with a client, and he was telling me about having conversations with peers. He actually made a career change. He was in a new location, new career. He's very happy and excited about that. He's actually been there for a couple of months now, but pretty recent. And he was telling me about conversations that he had been having with different peers there, and one of whom was a doctor. One of them had their doctorate. They were not a medical doctor, but they had their doctorate. And this individual, this client of ours, bright individual, educated in general in life, has a 4-year degree, advancing in the career, doing great things. But in banking, of course, He's watched Nelson's documentary. He's read Becoming Your Own Banker. Or he's in the middle of reading Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, Nash's second book. And he's just doing all the right things, listening on our channel, doing all the right things to learn and be educated about privatized banking. And here are these folks, one of whom had a whole life policy, saying, well, no, whole life isn't like that. And they might be right. I mean, full disclosure, they might be right if they just had a traditional, plain Jane, vanilla whole life insurance policy. And don't get me wrong, I've spoken adamantly and extensively about how I believe that a properly structured whole life policy with a mutual company that pays dividends is the ideal asset. There are 16 reasons that I'm aware of and that I talk about, and I've done full episodes on that. But be that as it may, that individual was saying, well, no, whole life isn't exactly like that. And they might have been right. I don't know what their policy is like. But our client was talking about his experience with his policy and how it had been structured for him and how he knew how to use it. And that's what he was telling this other individual. It's like, you just don't know, the power behind a whole life policy and what you can do with it. And then the other individual, the one with the doctorate, was saying how, well, that's a scam and this and that and the other. Whole life, horrible place to put your money. You need to be doing something with, it wasn't mutual funds. He had said money market accounts, I believe is what it was. Because, at the time of this recording, banks are saying things about they'd like to give you a certain amount of interest because they want you to park your money with them in all these different areas. Be that as it may, what my client and I talked about was, and I used this bike analogy, and here was the analogy. It's real hard for somebody standing on their 2 feet to tell me who's riding a bike that can't work. If I'm riding the bike, you can't tell me nothing. Now, I know that's bad grammar, but I say it that way because it sounds good. It feels good. You might have laughed. I try to be particular about my grammar, but that just sounds funny, so I'm using it. I mean, if I'm riding a bike and you're standing there watching me and you're not riding a bike, you can't tell me nothing about how to ride a bike or that won't work. Okay. I already know I've got this level of belief. Okay. And then, of course, just like I said in the prior level of understanding, I know enough to get started. I said that you're realizing that you don't know what you don't know. Well, in this level of belief, this third level, where belief comes into play because you're making policy loans, you're accessing capital, you're doing things with your money, you're controlling this whole process. You have this belief, and this quote comes to mind at this level of understanding, and it's the Will Rogers quote of, the problem in America isn't so much of what people don't know, but it's what they think they know that just ain't so. See, there are plenty of folks out there that will regurgitate to us, well, Dave Ramsey says this, Susie Orman says that, my brother-in-law says this, that's a horrible place to put money, whole life agents are scammers, etc. Whatever it is they all say, and they do say plenty, and we also address that here. We've got a myths and a misconceptions and a mysteries playlist, in particular on our podcast and on our YouTube, where we cover those types of things. And we've got a quote series where we cover some popular, whether they're good or bad, but some popular quotes concerning finances. So lots of resources there, lots of materials there, but we all hear these things and we've been inundated with these things. Actually, I would say we've been propagandized with these conventional financial anecdotes. But at this point of belief, you can't tell me nothing. So I was having a very good time in that conversation this week with my client who's like, Jesse, I've already made my first policy loan. I was already doing this with it, this thing that I have going on in my life that I'm very excited about. He was actually using his for investing. He's, like I've said, been making great moves on the traditional career front and using his cash flows to capitalize this policy. And he's really animated about investing, and he's doing investing. So I'm not making investing advice. I'm just sharing about a conversation with a friend about his joy and his disbelief. That was one of the things that I love to hear, because I could notice the belief in him talking to me about how he couldn't get that this educated individual with their doctorate, okay, someone with their doctorate, and he aspires for further education himself, looking at a master's program here in the next 12 months himself. And yet he was astounded that this this individual with a doctorate degree was so closed-minded about this idea and wasn't getting it. And again, that's where I go back to what I said earlier about I don't know what makes some people this way or that way, but I do know why Nash included the arrival syndrome as one of the main human problems. He actually said it might be the most difficult one to overcome. So you got to face it. I got to face it. This mentality of, well, I've arrived. I know it all. I know it all. I'm sure you don't know any doctor, and I'm not bashing on folks with further education. I'm just saying it's a human problem. We all have to confront it. But maybe with our much learning, we can also corner ourselves. We can also limit ourselves through our much learning. Okay, so I'm just saying we've got to be humble. We've got to be open to learning if we want to continue to advance. We must fight that human problem of the arrival syndrome. Now, the fourth level of understanding, I just called it deeper understanding. And here's what I'm saying. I can remember taking a walk. I was taking a walk just to take a walk. But I was taking a walk. This would have been a year and a half, 2 years. I don't even think quite 3 years, but maybe. But anyway, there was this point in time where my wife and I had multiple policies. I know we had our first two. I had one on me. She had one on her. We were paying significant premiums. We were doing big things. We'd already made a great run, a great foray into our debt recapture. And I'm taking this walk and I'm thinking about things that we have going on in life. And I have this aha moment where, and I can't even remember now what it is, but at the time I took it and I ran with it. But I just remember something sinking in. I can't remember if it was about how the interest that we're recapturing is able to become additional premiums, and that really even advances more the compounding that takes place on our capital, which just grows and scales everything that we're wanting to do. But something just clicked for me. Something just settled in. Now, again, remember, we've been paying premiums for some time, months, if not years, okay? We'd been paying premiums. We'd been making policy loans. We believed in this concept. We were doing this thing. And several months, or at least, or maybe even a couple of years into that process, I had something click for me. Something just settled in on that walk. And if I've not said it before, I would encourage you to find that thing in your life, whether it's hot showers when everyone else is in bed, or a walk outside where you can. Zig Ziglar used to talk about this. He said these types of walks, where he would say walks, but find some place, some time that works for you. You'd be surprised the kind of aha moments you can have about different things if you give yourself space and quiet and time. So that's just my encouragement to you there. But I had this aha moment where something sunk in for me unexpectedly, and it was a big help to me at the time. I remember coming back home and telling Lauren, it was like, Lauren, I was on this walk and I had this realization about this thing, and we talked about it and we implemented whatever it was. And I'm the biggest believer that becoming your own banker is the most simple thing. It's the very fact that you that's listening to me now, can become your own banker. That's it. You could do that thing for yourself, just like I've done that for myself, me and my family, and we're setting up the next generation. Well, I'm going to get to that in just a second in this next level. But this deeper understanding level, just anticipate it. So what I'm saying here is, if you're vetting this idea, I'm trying to cast a vision for you of what it can look like down the road. And if you're a client, but you're early on in your process, I'm also trying to set some expectations. There are levels to understanding this concept. Okay. There are levels to understanding the idea that you can become your own banker. No matter how far along you are, as long as you're fighting the arrival syndrome, like I said. So that's my encouragement to you if you're already on your journey of becoming your own banker and you're a client as well. And the last level of understanding that I've written down, and I hope that it encapsulates everything that I want it to. The last one I just called Beyond. And I'll tell you, the line, to infinity and beyond. Tim Allen as Buzz Lightyear in the Disney movie, that line came to mind. And I just called this level Beyond because I've not arrived. Like I said, I'm doing my best to fight off the arrival syndrome myself. I'm encouraging you to fight off the arrival syndrome no matter which level you're currently at. That's always a battle for us, okay? And you need to fight the good fight in that cause. And I don't know what's beyond. I mean, I've had some great people in my life that I've gleaned, people that have been in this way longer than I have gleaned lots and lots from, who have greater experience, longer experience than me. There are some folks on the air out there with their own podcasts and their own shows and their own practices, and they're helping folks. And, they personally knew R. Nelson Nash. I never got to meet R. Nelson Nash in this life. Look forward to it in the next one. But I never got to work, and be mentored and learn directly from Nash. Thankfully, I've been able to read his books. Thankfully, I can listen to a seminar. Thankfully, I can see his documentary that Jason and them made for letting us have an opportunity to get to know Nash, the creator and the conceiver and the founder of the infinite banking concept. Thankfully, we have those things. But I don't know everything about what's beyond here. Sure, I've got great anticipation, and we're doing things now that we expect to affect I'm talking about in our personal lives now, our passive income years. We're in active income earning years right now. My wife and I are our household. We're in that phase of life of we're raising a family, and we're building this business, and we're coaching and mentoring and teaching other people that you can become your own banker. And we're in this active income earning phase of life. I am a believer in what Nash says and what Rabbi Daniel Lapin says and some great other folks, that you should never retire. Now, again, if that's a new concept for you, I'd encourage you to read, Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. I would encourage you to read Rabbi Daniel Lapin's book called Thou Shalt Prosper. He's got a chapter in there about never retire. That's the title of the chapter. So I'm putting that in your lap. You do with that what you want. But what I'm saying is what we're doing with our system of policies now and how we're implementing the infinite banking concept is going to play into our passive income earning years. We don't have the same traditional plans and programs that we did back when I was a teacher or a law enforcement officer, or my wife working, as an employee of a hospital. We're not in those roles now. We don't have those things now, the 401ks, the state retirements, and I'm surely not counting on Social Security for passive income later in life. This is it. This is what we're doing. We're owning these private assets that will be able to cash flow now and in the future. And not only that, they're going to account for what's going to be eventually a tax-free transfer of wealth to our future generations and to the organizations that we care about, that we wish to impact beyond our lifetimes here on the earth. So everything that we're doing now is playing into this beyond level of understanding. So, mentally, I'm prepared to continue learning, to continue letting iron sharpen iron as I have conversations every week with clients and prospective clients and other folks that are on their way of becoming their own banker. And in what we're doing in our household and in our business to finance the things that we are doing in life. And of course, teaching our children how to, from the start, become their own bankers. They don't have to go into debt to go to college. They don't have to be in debt for their first car. They don't have to be in debt for their first home. They don't have to run everything up on credit cards. They don't have to be beholden to the conventional lending system on these personal loans or home equity lines of credit or et cetera. They're going to be their own bankers. And we're teaching them how to teach our grandchildren, future grandchildren. Our children are young right now, and the next generations to, from the start, not have that Egypt experience or that Babylon experience like Nash talks about in his second book, but to live financially independent and autonomous as their own bankers. That's what we're teaching them. So this level that I'm in right now of beyond, I don't know what all it holds. I know it's going to hold growth. I know it's going to have more conversations. I know it's going to hold more business for us as we're teaching other people how to become their own bankers. I know that it's going to involve my own continued growth by reading Nash's recommended works. I mean, I want to read the things that influenced R. Nelson Nash when he wrote his book. And of course, he's done us the great favor of making lists at the end of his books of things that he has read and recommendations that he has in that regard. So here's my encouragement for everyone that's listening and watching this information is that you can become your own banker. I encourage you to read R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. Read his second book, Building Your Warehouse of Wealth. I encourage you can get a hold of his seminar from his website, infinitebanking.org. You can watch his documentary online. It's about an hour long. It's great. It's fantastic. I love it. You can have a conversation with me. You can get my calendar and we can get your questions answered. We can talk about what it would look like for you to implement becoming your own banker. And I do look forward to those conversations. So if you'd like to have a conversation about how to implement for your household, your business, your investing, get my calendar. It would mean a lot to me if you're already a client, and particularly if this has been helpful to you, share this information with somebody. I don't have a big marketing plan. You know, our business is normally folks are telling their friends, their family members, their neighbors, their coworkers, just like I was talking about. Like I was talking about young man client this week talking with folks at work in this new job that he's in about how he's becoming his own banker. So share our presentation. We've got a presentation online and of course the podcast, but let's have a conversation about how you can become your own banker wherever you're at in these different levels of belief. And I do look forward to that conversation and I hope you have a great day. Take care. I don't guess so. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. Let's go and do that again. Just in case. The people that you like to see send with money. Can you see that? No, you can't. Oh. More power. No, what was he? Is that how he says it? I'm a big Tim Allen fan. I should learn his voice. That's not close enough. That's not quite right. How does he say it? To infinity and beyond. Buzz, Lightyear to the rescue. That's going to be yelling. I'm sorry.